Warning: some of these stories contain graphic content. Listener's discretion is advised. I'm still pretty jarred from this experience, but I figure it'd be easier to share than just dwell on this on my own. A couple days ago, someone broke into my house while I was asleep. I work night shift, so sleeping during the day is something you learn to get used to. Around 6:30 p.m., I heard what I thought it was, a loud knocking sound coming from outside, and my dog was going completely ballistic from it. For reference, I live in a farm out in the middle of nowhere. My closest neighbor is about a half a mile away, but, back to the story. I, somewhat, woke up, but don't really think anything of it since my neighbors like to shoot their guns and this is somewhat of a hunting season. As I started falling back asleep, my heart started fluttering weird, like as if I knew something wasn't right. That's when I heard the loudest footsteps throughout the entire house. The dogs are still barking, but they start to quiet down. That's when I really begin to worry. When I think my dogs will protect me at this time, fat chance. The footsteps stop on the other side of the bedroom door and doesn't move. I really think that this is how I was going to die, and although I had a weapon in my room, I knew I couldn't get to it without being heard. It felt like an eternity before the steps moved around and towards my brother's bedroom. The rustling can be heard loudly through the house and things being thrown around. I knew they were in my brother's room. Some of his friends were in these shady situations, and I knew that this had to be one of them. I heard the footsteps coming back to my door, and the doorknob begins to shuffle and move. I immediately turned my back towards the door and closed my eyes tight. I had my hand over my mouth to stop from screaming. The door opens, but that's it. Then he leaves as a car drives down the road. I finally bucked up my courage and to get out of my bed. Everything in the room except for my brother's room was undisturbed. I immediately called my brother and asked if any of his friends were over here. He said that no, not that he knew of, and then I told him what happened. He got off the phone with me to start calling around. I went back to bed and noticed that I still had my window cracked over from earlier, and realized I had my sheets off of me wearing only a t-shirt to bed. If it was only who I think it was, this wasn't a random event. One of my brother's friends always had eyes out for me, and the fact that he saw me sleeping in just a t-shirt makes me freak out. Whether or not he took something out of my brother's room or knew that I was home alone before having to leave to work later that night, I don't know. I'll post an update when I hear from my brother. You move out into the country to get away from the activity of the city life, and you just let your guard down. That's when something like this happens. Sometimes, country life isn't so safe after all. Update. Sorry y'all for the last update. It's been a crazy week, but thank you for bearing with me on this. My brother got back to me with the news, and I absolutely dread from hearing it. None of his friends said or claimed to have been to our house at this time of the incident. Now I'm even more afraid of who was in my home and what their intentions were. They could have been scoping out my house during the day. I just hope I don't have to have another visit like that anytime soon. But if there is a next time, I'll be sure to be ready for them. Okay, picture this. I'm around 15, 16-year-old girl. It's the middle of winter and around 7 p.m. I'm coming down with a mild cold. My parents are home and my sister is off at a school event. So I take this time to take a long bath to try and soothe whatever is in my system. About 10 minutes into the bath, I hear a frank knock at my front door. This doesn't strike me as too odd, as everyone in the family had a tendency to lose anything. I get out of the bath and put on a robe. I'm about to walk up to the door when something stops me. I'm not sure what, but I get the urge to check with my parents. I grab my phone and I texted them something with, "Hey, are you locked out?" The knocking at the door got louder. My dog, who was in his crate, started barking. My phone rings and my dad responds with, "No, I'm with your sister at her school event." My dog's barking started to make me nervous. She's not necessarily a quiet dog, but she never barks at my family or I. I decided to tiptoe out of the bathroom and into my sister's room, which is right next to the front door. I looked through the blinds and I saw a man at my door. My heart drops. This isn't my mom or anyone that I knew. It's a man wearing all black with ragged hair and a crowbar in his hand and what looked like, I guess, and I assumed that he had a gun in his pocket. I took a good look at him, so I'm sure it was a gun. He pounds on my door this time. I can see he's using both of his hands to do so. My dog starts going crazy at this point. Once she starts up, I see the man step back and beckon to the car in the front. Another guy jumps out and walks onto my porch. I decide that's enough. I run over to my dog's crate and let her out. She's not a large dog, but she's a loud one. She starts jumping at the door, barking so much that she had to take labor breaths and growling at the crack that reached to the outside. I hear a faint, "Oh hell no," before I hear a car slam and crunching gravel, a clear sign that the car has left. My dad rushed home, and I frantically explained about what happened. We searched our front yard and porch to check to see if they left any evidence. The only thing we found? Dents where the man had pounded onto the door. Okay, so I'm a SEAL, and at this time, I was deployed. My wife and I own a house just outside of Denver where she stays with our kids when I'm overseas. She's a teacher, so she's off in the summer and spends most of the time at home as she's not a huge people person. Our kids were in Florida, staying with their grandpa, so it was just her. My wife never liked being home alone, and I hated the thought of her being scared and just feeling vulnerable, but I didn't have much of a choice. I made sure that she knew how to use all of my guns and had a security system, so I'd like to believe that she is out there safe all by herself. One day, she was out shopping and she noticed a truck following her around. So she drove in a circle to confirm that she's in fact followed. When they continued to follow, she did the smartest thing and she memorized the license plate and drove straight to the nearest police station. She filed a report, but nothing could be done. She went home and she was a bit on edge, but she just tried not to think about it. My wife is very beautiful, so attracting unwanted attention is something that she is sadly somewhat used to. Later that night, she was making herself some buffalo chicken and watching Netflix when she heard a tapping sound in the window. She couldn't identify the source of the sound, so she closed all the curtains and double-checked all the locks before carrying on with her night. When she was asleep that night, a cold, dirty hand grabbed her by the throat so tight that she couldn't even speak. A large man looming over her, but she couldn't make out his face since it was just so dark. He barked at her to shut up and do not bite. As he started to undo his belt buckle, she caught on right away and kicked him right in the stomach to free herself. She threw herself off the bed and grabbed my handgun out of the nightstand. She doesn't remember much of this, but she shot him right in the face, but he somewhat kept coming at her. She kept shooting him until he stopped moving towards her. The police arrived quickly, and the man's remains a John Doe to this very day. She wasn't charged with anything, and she doesn't regret what she did. To this day, we have no clue on how he got in without setting alarms, but we are very thankful that our kids weren't home. We concluded that he somehow followed her home and got into the house without alerting her. We've since adopted a German Shepherd and a Doberman, as well as upgrading the security system. I'm so thankful I married a badass, and she was unharmed. This happened when I was a teen. I can't remember exactly when, but I think I was about 17 at this point. It was school holidays, and I was at home with my friend. We'll call her Talia. And my domestic worker. We'll call her Let's Go. It was around 11 a.m., and we were all hanging out in my room. Let's Go had been washing dishes, and she glanced out into the window, and in another window, she saw the reflection of two men in our backyard. She ran upstairs to tell me exactly what she had seen, and I immediately hit the panic button. The alarm started sounding loudly throughout the house. I remember calling my dad, telling him what's happening, but he was working and he was a bit far away, and it would take some time to get here. I believe he called the police at this point. I wanted to run downstairs and lock the security gate at the bottom of the stairs, but at that point, even over the loud wailing of the house alarm, we could distinctly hear the crack of the wood splitting as the door opened at the back of the house. I was worried that they would be faster than us, and I decided not to go downstairs. Instead, we raced across the upstairs, landing to lock ourselves in my parents' room. We reached the bedroom door, and crap, there's no key. We ran back across the land again, and just as we were passing up the stairs, we saw those two guys bounding up on them just a meter or two away. They were very large men, at least over 6 feet tall, clutching in their hands a screwdriver and a rope. This is not a good sign. Let's go try to grab our cell phones from the guest room as we passed. One of the men slapped her across the face, grabbed the phones, and pushed her into the bedroom. Talia and I kept running, with the two men just a couple of meters behind us. We reached the end of the landing, dashed into my mom's office, and I slammed the door behind me. My heart sank as I heard the click of the key hitting the opposite wall. It had been on the other side of the door. Crap. At this point, Talia is hysterical, crying in the corner with both of her hands on her head as I held the door shut. What are we gonna do? Oh my god, oh my god. I felt strangely calm. I just remember thinking that I could not let anything happen to her. Knock, knock. Hello? I was in utter disbelief as the two intruders calmly knocked on the office door, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. We did not respond. And then again, knock, knock. Hello? Once again. Hello? Hello? Once again, we did not respond. The two men then started turning the doorknob and pushing the door open. I tried to stop the knob from turning, but I just couldn't get a good grip on it. I pushed back on the door, digging my heels into the carpet as deep as I possibly could. Just then, the phone started to ring. I knew it was our response. I shouted to Talia, "Answer the phone! Tell him what's happening! Speak loudly!" I wanted the intruders to know that someone was on their way to save us. While she was on the phone with security, I was fighting with these two men with all my strength controlling the door. They pushed it open wide, enough for a small adult to slip through, and I shoved back with all my might and got it just about to shut again. It felt like this was going on forever, but in reality, it was probably only a few minutes. The whole time the alarm was blaring loudly. Eventually, the men left. After waiting it out a while, we felt safe enough to leave the room. My dad got there first, and we told him everything that happened. On response arrived 45 minutes after we spoke to them on the phone. Like, gee, thanks. We'd be dead already, or worse, but whatever. The police arrived 2 hours after them. Yeah, no one here relies on the cops in South Africa. It was only when we were explaining the whole thing to the cops that the reality started to set off and the adrenaline started to wear off. I went into shock and was all shaky for a bit, but I felt grateful that everyone was okay. I'm still amazed what adrenaline can do. How does a tiny teenage girl able to hold back two large grown men? It's just insane. After that day, I really realized what I'm capable of, and when crap hits the fan, and also, if crap goes down, you're really on your own and you really need to have a plan because the chances are that no one is coming to give you a second chance at life. Only you can help yourself. So, that's probably the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. This happened about a year ago at my aunt's house. It was the summertime and the weather had been exceptional here and there. It was late around night, maybe around 3 or 4 in the morning. Usually during the summer, I would stay up watching YouTube or Netflix until sunrise. This particular night, something happened that I could only imagine. The house we were staying at only had one bathroom, and I had to go. It was currently occupied, and usually when that happens, I would just go outside and piss in the woods. I decided to do that again. I go out there, and it was like mid-60s, very warm and clear skies. There's a main street straight across the house. I finish up and begin walking back to the house. Before I open the door, I hear a deep voice screaming, "Hey!" I was a little startled due to the fact that it was late night and someone was outside screaming. I thought it might have been neighbors arguing, but it seemed like they were a lot closer than that. I go back to look to see if there was something, but to my surprise, I see a very dark figure standing in the middle of the road. Me, being a dumbass, screamed back at him, sort of joking, yo. The figure didn't move at this point. I was creeped out because whoever it was didn't respond. Even though it was dark out, the lights on the side of the street gave me a little bit of a view of the person's face. It was looking directly at me, emotionless. I decided to turn back inside and let it go. I decided to watch YouTube again for about another hour or so. After finishing up, it was around 5 in the morning, so I decided to call it a night and crash. The next day, I woke up later in the evening. I go into the kitchen to get something to drink, and my mom was in a state of shock. I asked her, "What's wrong?" And she said that there was a home invasion last night across the street. I was so disturbed. I couldn't even speak. I eventually got my voice back, and I asked her if the cops catch the man involved. And she looked at me with wide eyes and said, "No." This happened about 7 years ago, but I never got over it. I was living on a basement suite on a relatively quiet street in a small town where nobody typically hangs out around at night. Being young and stupid, I often didn't bother to close any blinds, even though our windows were all on the ground level. It was about midnight, and I was lying on my bed in a nude. I had just gotten out of the shower, by the way, and talking to my boyfriend at the time with the lights on. So, basically, due to my idiocy, anyone could see me inside and look at me, but I would not be able to see them. More stupid than this was that my boyfriend and I decided to have passionate hugging on the phone under these conditions. When I was done on the phone and gotten dressed, I went to my roommate's bedroom to hang out with her. Immediately after I got into her bedroom, she and I heard someone aggressively trying to open my bedroom window. We rushed into my room, only to find them gone, but we heard loud footsteps running towards her bedroom instead. We then heard them trying to open her bedroom window, and failing at that, running around to the side of the house and try the bathroom window, and then mine again. Next, we heard the trespasser running up the stairs at the back of the house that led to the upstairs suite where no one was home, and try the balcony door. At this point, we just called the police. The person was gone and never came back, but it definitely made me think twice about just being how reckless that was. Just knowing that someone was lurking outside my window, watching me in the aforementioned situation, and then just tried frantically to get into the house, knowing that my roommate and I were both in the house. It just terrifies me to this very day. Just to clarify, it wasn't possible for any of my neighbors to see me. I know what I did was dumb, but my window was in a position where it was legitimately only possible to see inside if you were purposely trying to lurk in my backyard, where there was nothing but forest and no line of sight of any other buildings. My bedroom was also only a few feet lower than the window, so you would have to try your absolute best to try to take a peek. So, creepy guy at the window, let's not meet ever again. This incident happened about 5 years ago. This is a story where I never tell anyone because most people are either uncomfortable hearing it or make, well, mean comments about what I should have done in this situation without really understanding how difficult your mind works when you're in an absolute panic. But you guys seem to get it. So, here's my story. I was living in a relatively nice apartment in downtown Memphis, working as a ophthalmic technician. I arrived home from work at my usual time, around 4:30 p.m. Unlocked my doors and went inside. I set my phone, wallet, and keys in the kitchen island, hearing my heavy metal front door swing shut loudly behind me, and began taking care of some errands around the house. Having grown up in a small town, it was habit for me to not lock my front door during the day, especially when I knew my husband would be home soon anyway. I've never forgotten to lock my door once in 5 years to this very day. I walked through my bathroom and into my large walk-in closet and began hanging up the laundry that I started earlier in the day before to work. My front door opened and I smiled with surprise. My husband was home a little early, and I was happily called out to him. "I'm in here, love." Instead, I was met with silence. I began to feel that sinking feeling of something's wrong, crawling up to my spine. I tried to shake it off, thinking my husband simply just hadn't heard me. I walked out into my living room / kitchen area. Standing on the other side of my kitchen island was a complete stranger. He was a male, older than me. I would estimate 50s, but it's hard for me to recall exact facial features or details from this very moment. And he was just standing there, staring at me, No ski mask, no weapon, just watching me. I wonder if maybe he just walked into the wrong apartment and was going to apologize and leave, but as he continued to stare at me, I realized that I needed to do something other than just gape at this stranger in my house. I stood taller, puffed my chest in the attempt to look more threatening, which is hard to do because I'm a small female, and used a loud, clear voice to tell him to get out of my apartment, that he had no business of being here. He completely ignored me, like I haven't even spoken. Then he began to pick up my things, my cell phone, my keys, my wallet. He picked them up methodically and then put them in his own pockets. That's when it truly hit me that this person was dangerous. I was naive enough to believe that it was all a mistake until this very moment. I darted forward. Only other device that I had would allow me to get some help. My computer. I had to take few steps closer to the intruder in order to reach it, but still about 15 to 12 feet between us. So I knew I could grab it and run before he can reach me. As soon as I picked it up and turned to run, I saw him start to move towards me. I sprinted backwards to the bathroom because it was the only place I can go and put 2 locks between us, my bathroom door and my closet. I slammed and locked the first door, and within seconds, I could hear him messing with it, trying to open it. I ran into the closet and locked the door too, opening my computer, getting on Facebook Messenger to contact my husband. I sent messages after messages, pleading with him to call 911 and tell him that there was an intruder in the apartment. He got the messages within minutes and assured me that he had a dispatcher on the phone, and he was leaving work himself to try and get to me if he could. I waited and waited. The bathroom door opened, and the intruder came inside. He moved to the closet door and started trying to break down the door too. Here's the part where people usually start to give me advice on how I should have reacted. But all I could tell you all was that I was just frozen, with fear, with shock. I don't know, but I didn't scream or cry or search for a weapon in that dark closet. I didn't brace a door or try to keep it closed. I just kneeled in my closet and just waited to die because I just knew that's what's going to happen. People like to tell me that I live in an apartment. Surely if I scream for help, maybe someone will come and help me, right? Surely there was something heavy enough for me to grab in the closet to defend myself. Hell, if even my laptop would have hurt this guy if I swung at him. Why didn't I do anything? To be honest, I really don't have an answer for that. But the door miraculously held. I heard frustration steps going back and forth into the living room area, and I heard things breaking, like bottle shatterings in my drawers and the refrigerators and cabinets being flung open as things were being torn out of them. I continued to sit in the closet, silently crying, wanting to leave, but feeling that death was inevitable. I feel awful about my selfishness in that very moment, but I messaged my mom, who lived about 15 hours drive away, and I told her what was happening. I desperately wanted comfort, and I told her how much I loved her. I'm not a parent, but I could just only imagine the fear and helplessness I put her through, knowing that her daughter was in danger and that there was nothing that she could do to help me. She messaged me constantly, begging me to keep replying. I told her I would as long as I could, but I told her to tell my brothers that I love them, to help my husband through whatever happens next if it ended badly for me. The intruder started messing with the closet door again, mumbling disjointed words that I couldn't really distinguish. I remember hoping that the police would get into my apartment before my husband, that he wouldn't be the one to find me in whatever state this intruder left me in. The front door opened again, and it was my husband, shouting for me. The intruder walked out in the living room kitchen area again, and I opened the door and darted from the closet to find my husband on the ground with them, pinning him in the ground. The man kept mumbling at times, yelling, but never really put up much of a resistance. This entire part was a blur for me. I remember feeling like the room was spinning, filling with fear, mostly for my husband at this point. Eventually, the police found the apartment. It took them about 25 minutes to arrive, which still blows my mind. I know time seems to move slowly during scary situations, so I thought it was less than that, but from the time my husband dialed 911 to the time the officers arrived was 25 excruciating minutes. This isn't intent to bash him in any way. It just seems like it was just an unusual long response time for a home invasion. I got my things back from the man and took him out of the apartment. I numbly went through the process of filling the police report, telling them exactly what happened. One of the officers commented that I should have just kept my door locked at all times. I remember feeling like he was just being really insensitive to me at the time, or blaming me for what happened, but later recognized that his words were coming from experience. I'm sure he's seen the situation end differently for other women. Within 30 minutes, the scariest incident of my life was finally over. But I've carried that fear, the violation, the anxiety of having someone intrude in my space of years. If it happened to me once, it could happen again. This is a quick story. I was at my job, just doing my job, and I get an alert on my phone. I figured that I would just watch the cameras after I get home. And so after the last 2 hours, I get 3 more alerts. And as I was taking my bus back to home, I watched the cameras, and I watched my ex take a hammer to my back door. I kept on watching as he struggled against the deadbolt, and then I saw him enter. I called the police faster than I could, and I told him that there was a break-in at my address. I continued to watch the video after that. 15 minutes after he entered, he left with a duffel bag. I arrived back to my house, only to see police outside. They had beat me to it. I identified myself as the homeowner and went inside to check the damage. The entire place was trashed, along with my duffel bag, and some jewelry was missing. I gave the police the evidence that it was my ex-boyfriend, and I gave him the place where he was crashing at. I then called out to put a restraining order against him, along with to replace the deadbolt. Not long after, they caught him at a pawn shop. He was trying to get back at me for dumping him. I am now happy with the restraining order in place, along with the ex in jail for a year for breaking and entering. For context, I'm a 20-year-old female, and I started an OnlyFans account over the summer to support myself through school, and things were great until I posted my Amazon wish list. So, Amazon doesn't release your address to people who gift you items, but third-party sellers can. That's when things went wrong. By the way, not trying to promote it here, this is a very frightening story, and I felt like it just was the best fitting for this subreddit. In late July, I got a puppy. One night after 2 in the morning, I took him outside to go to the bathroom. While he was doing his business, I noticed a car parked outside of my family home. I saw a figure in the car and could only tell that they were looking at me, but I couldn't make out their face because it was just pitch black outside. Feeling a bit uneasy, I picked up my puppy to take him back inside, and when I started to move, the car parked in my driveway. I sprinted back inside and locked the door, but they never approached the house. The next morning, I went to check my mail. There was an envelope addressed to my OnlyFans account with a $20 bill in it. But that's it. No note. I was currently still at home with my parents and they had no idea about my OnlyFans account, so I didn't mention it to them. A week later, I went back to my college town to get ready for school. At this time, I stopped posting for the time being, until I could figure out how they got my address. I watched enough crime shows to know that there was a possibility that I could be in danger. I live in a duplex with a gated parking lot, for reference. One morning, I was planning on vlogging my trip to Target because I was planning on starting a YouTube channel in the near future since OnlyFans felt unsafe. When I got to my car, it had been ransacked, and my vlogging camera was missing. I know it's my fault for leaving it in my car, but I was using it the night before, and since it was in a gated area, I just didn't think it would be unsafe. It wasn't in plain sight either. I had it hidden in the glove compartment. I used that exact camera to film my not safe for work content, and the SD card was in there, and it had all the unreleased photos. I know they stole it just for the SD card. Anyways, this is where the story gets weird. There are cameras outside the parking lot, so we were able to watch this person break into my car and find the camera. And they didn't even touch the other 7 cars in the parking lot, so they knew that which car was mine, which suggests that they had been watching me for a bit. After they got the camera, they walked around the duplex until stopping near my window. My bedroom faces an outside street, and my blinds are broken, so it's very easy to see in. I have a curtain, but it doesn't cover my window all the way. This freaking person watched me sleep for an hour or so. I have no idea why they didn't try to break in, but thank God they didn't. This person sold the camera to a pawn shop, and since I knew the serial number, the police were able to find it. However, my SD card was still missing. I believe the police are still trying to track them down, but I have broken my lease and moved to a new place, so hopefully that will keep me safe. Hey, to the guy who terrorized me at my home, in my apartment, and stole my camera, let's not meet. I'm a 21-year-old female. I don't know how long this will actually be, but it took me about 4 days to be able to actually type this out. I don't know. I got these weird mini anxiety attacks when I tried. I'll be the first to admit that I have, or had, a very can't happen to me complex. And that's kind of what occurred in this story. I'm a university student. I live in a rental house with other 5 people. It's far from ideal. But in this housing outcry that we're having, it takes that sting off of us having to pay a bunch of money a month just to exist in a box. This has relevancy, I swear. I got extremely lucky last weekend when the 5 of the roommates I had were all out on the weekend. This has never happened, so I was ecstatic to have the whole house to myself. I did the whole 21-year-old girl home alone stuff you can think of. Watching movies with a loud volume, taking long-ass showers, walking around the house without a bra, etc., etc. It was around 10 p.m. I had finished some homework and was relaxing with a glass of wine and watching some streaming services. It sounded briefly like something moving on the porch. We had a fox in our yard before, and the thing used to make a lot of noise on our porch, so I assumed that had to be the case. After hearing some fumbling for the second time, I went over to check out through the window. There was nothing there. As I'm turning to head back into the living room, a piece of cement flies through our kitchen window. I think I peed myself a little bit when it happened, but I definitely screamed like a little girl. My moronic ass started unlocking the doors to go outside, but common sense seized to control me again. I locked the door back. I also ran to the back door to make sure it was locked, even though it's glass and wouldn't make a difference. Oddly enough, at this time, my grandma's words came into my head about something her own daughter had told her. If someone tries to break into your house, turn all the lights off. You know the inside of your house better than they do. I immediately shut off all the lights in the living room and managed to turn off the TV, which was hard because my hands were shaking badly. My dad used to give me and my siblings advice on protection measures, which were not resonant at this time. I secured myself in the upstairs bedroom and had to turn all the lights off in the house as I passed by them. While walking up the stairs, I could hear the doorknob shaking furiously from the front door. I don't know if there was more than one person or if they realized that they couldn't jump the fence to get into the yard. While calling for emergency services on my phone, I secured my hunting knife at the end of the hockey stick with hot pink duct tape. I know that's probably the most Canadian thing to say. If I was going to have to use it, at least it would look fabulous. I stayed in the dark, holding my makeshift spear for what probably felt like 15 minutes. I'm really glad I wasn't being murdered in that amount of time. The operator told me that the police were coming, which eventually they did. It took a very unsettling amount of time. The only reason I left the bedroom in the first place was because I heard knocking on the door downstairs, and the police lights were flashing through the window. Otherwise, someone would just had come right in and physically pulled me out of the room. Statements were given, and that's all they did. Literally, all they did. Literally, all they did. Nothing else. Literally, that. I am livid. But a very nice female officer stayed with me in the house and helped me clean up the glass until my brother showed up to bring me to his place for the weekend. So shout out to the officer cutie with the tattoos. I made an appointment with the doctor to get out my anxiety medicines, as well as medicine for nightmares. I know I wasn't in physical danger at that point, but I had some very charming dreams of similar scenarios, and I just find it easier to stay awake. Maybe that's juvenile of me, but hey, I'm human. Meds are working fine, and I'm back at my house, the wall-to-wall people again, and honestly, I don't hate that so much anymore. So please, everyone, have a fun and safe weekend. It was the summer before my freshman year of high school. The year was 1998. My parents and younger brother were out of town, and I was basking in the freedom of being home alone for the entire day. I spent most of my time staying upstairs being quiet the entire time while watching cable TV. I chatted on the phone with my friends because, three-way phone call. Oh my god. After a few hours of MTV watching and phone chatting, I decided it was time to relax in the bubble bath and read a Stephen King book because that was my favorite pastime. My bedroom and bathroom were side by side on the second story of a very large 3-story house that sat at the edge of the small town. My dad was a local pastor in the small town, so we would have random people show up at our hour of the day or night, feeding food and just giving out money. And sometimes they can be very persistent. I was instructed that when I was home alone, I was to not answer the door. Just stay out of sight until people would just go on about their day. This strategy had worked for years, so why change it now? On this particular day, all has been quiet. The bathroom was upstairs and out of sight of any doors. It was the only interior door that was locked, so I've always felt relatively safe in there. I shut off my TV, hung up the phone. Yes, poured it to the wall. Oh my god, right? I went to the bathroom and ran a bubble bath. Once the tub was full, I climbed in and started reading my book. I got about a chapter in when all hell broke loose. I heard the sound of breaking glass coming from the kitchen below me, the room to the left at the foot of the stairs. Also, the room with the back door in it, which consists of a giant double pane of really old glass. My mother was always scolding us for shutting the door too hard. She was convinced that we would break it. The sound of breaking glass is followed by a loud voice of a man's voice. A man that was not my father's. I got out of the tub as quickly and quietly as I could, grabbed a towel, closed the bathroom door, and slid the lock over. I stood at the door, listening for what felt like an eternity. Then again, from the kitchen, a man's voice. This time, quickly followed by a woman's voice that was not my mother. Jeez. 2 damn intruders were in the kitchen. And there I stood, butt naked, dripping wet, with nothing but a bath towel to protect me. Now I'm in a really full-blown panic. What the hell was I supposed to do? I look around the bathroom for weapons, and the best thing I come up with was a plastic handle toilet plunger. Like that was gonna help. At this point, I realized that I haven't heard anyone for a couple of minutes. So I decided that I was going to sneak out to the top of the stairs and just give it a listen. Maybe they left after realizing that we didn't have many items of street value. Armed with a toilet plunger, I unlocked the bathroom and tiptoed to the top stairs. Within seconds of them talking in the kitchen, I decided I needed an evacuation plan and better weapons. I tiptoed back into the bedroom and re-locked the door. I knew I didn't have much time until they come over to explore/rob the upstairs, so I had to hurry. I knew that when I get to the bottom of the stairs, I would be in full view of the kitchen, and the stairs creaked, so they would definitely hear me coming. I also knew that the base of the stairs led to the front door, if I make a quick right. So I realized if I get down and out the door before they realize what's going on, I might be okay. But if they heard me coming, I might be fighting for my life. So I need a good weapon because it was going to be at least 2-on-1 fight. I snuck out of the bathroom and into my bedroom. The whole time I heard them in the kitchen area. The best thing I come up with in my bedroom was a lighter and a bottle of hairspray. I will melt the bastard's face off. And went back to the top of the stairs and listened again. The sons of bitches were still down there. I counted to 3 and made a run for it. Lighter and hairspray at the ready. I reached the landing and turned to glance at the kitchen. That's when everything became obvious. Sitting in the middle of the kitchen table was my father's pager for the squad. The male EMT was telling the female dispatcher that they had just arrived at the hospital. I let out a big whoosh of air and started hysterically laughing at my stupidity. The door wasn't broken, and I was still home alone. Frickin' pagers.